Welcome everyone, Dr. Thor here. Get ready for Gnosis. Well, let's talk about Thomas Galen Heironymus. And anyone who's involved in subtle energy physics, otherwise known as radionics, is familiar with that name. And of course, he was a person who called this energy Eloptic energy. And it's very important that we understand that he was trying to describe subtle informational energetic fields. So this is what he called it. He called it Eloptic energy. So, and really was really on to something. He was an interesting man who worked in electronics and other things. He did live to be 92 or 3, I'm not entirely sure, but he's one of the few radionic pioneers who actually did live long. Most of them died fairly young, in their late 60s, early 70s, which a lot of people thought was normal back in the 50s and 60s. People didn't seem to live as long, but that's just not really true. But most radionic practitioners do not live very long, and that may be because they are dealing with a lot of negative energy. Well, maybe Heironymus had the constitution. His wife lived many years after him. I believe he died in 1988. I'm not entirely sure, but he's been gone for quite some time. And of course, he made his own type of machine. He did some research, and he was one of the few that actually patented a radionic machine in the United States using several different tricks. I knew a particular man who worked with him in Georgia. Of course, he ended his life, and his company was in Georgia for the last part of his life. So a lot of people went down there, and he was accessible, as I said, into the late 80s. So, making it to 92 is pretty good. I mean, that's a very large lifespan in general. So he had this background. He was involved in electronics. He worked for some major corporations. Not that that really means anything, but I did notice his name again, which prompted my interest in him. In a new book out there where people are talking about these kind of quantum fields, as this book is talked about. And I'm going to talk about this book in another lecture. But quoted in this book was the fact that Heironymus stated that you don't need a machine to connect with eloptic energy. So this gets back to this consciousness, higher self energy that I've been talking about. Another fascinating thing about his energy, and he made cosmic pipes, which were very interesting to draw energy in. These turned out to be a problem because they sucked in the toxins from the area, because cosmic pipes were kind of a radionic machine that was planted in the ground and served as a drawing energy. But they were drawing from the atmosphere, not the higher sources of energy that radionic is known from. And as such, they drew in a huge amount of radioactive and other toxins. So this whole technology was pretty much disregarded because of that. The other area that is similar to this is the same kind of accumulative effect that orgone accumulators have, particularly those made by Reich, was the fact that he accumulated energy out of the atmosphere. Just not a good idea to do. Especially as in this day and age. In the 50s or 60s, when Reich was more active, you may be able to get away with it to a certain degree. But, the atmosphere has always been highly toxic, and we have huge amounts of radiation from all the leaking power plants that are happening all over the world, and these everybody ignores. So we're too busy giving billions of dollars to Nazis to fight against basically our friends called the Russians. So the whole idea is that we have this kind of problem that we run into here. So it's a serious problem to understand. You've got to understand the way these energies work and what is a proper instrument, what do they draw. If they're cumulative in nature, then there's a problem. We make energy cells that serve as antennas. They don't accumulate energy, they attract it. There's a big difference. So and they accumulate high level, very fast energy fields that are coming here, neutrinos, tachyons, etc. This whole family of energies that are very pure, and there are trillions of them out through the universe. So collecting these and using them is generally something that isn't collecting the local toxins that are in there. But cosmic pipes is a very interesting subject matter, and I will have a little book on this in the future, a little booklet talking about that. And maybe they can be made on a smaller level to try and do things. But generally, if you're going to accumulate energy from the atmosphere, forget it. You have to get past that or use antennas to draw in the pure energies that are moving faster than the low-level toxic energies that are moving at much slower levels. Higher-level energies are generally not toxic. But what Heironymus did, and I find it very interesting in his work because it again parallels my own, and I haven't really read much on him. You know, I've worked with his machines to a degree. I've got a couple, but I haven't worked seriously with them. He had a couple of design factors that were little different. He uses tunable capacitors over potentiometers. That was one thing he used. Of course, he used vacuum tubes to start off with and moved to some other technology, mostly because that was becoming outdated. I think that was one of his big mistakes. He didn't understand the great value of vacuum tubes. But it's very important that he comes out and stated pretty much was in the ballpark. Number one, he states that eloptic energy is non-electromagnetic. Yeah, that's right. It's not. Not everything's in the electromagnetic spectrum, and basically anything of great value is not. Electrical energy, as we know it, electromagnetic fields, is a pretty primitive energy, and it's generated through primitive ways by making generators that generate electricity that have to be powered usually by fossil or other toxic fuels. So you have to spin the generator to create this energy and so forth. So it's a pretty primitive way. Now, the electricity itself is pretty primitive as well, and you're using very crude energies that go through wires, etc. So he considered eloptic energy or informational energetic fields, otherwise known as eloptic energy, as non-electromagnetic. Where'd you hear that from? The other thing is that he used in his machines exclusively Polaroid pictures. Now, this is a time when certainly 35 millimeter and film cameras were very available. I mean, remember, this guy lived almost to 1990, and photography certainly was at a pretty high art in the late 1980s, and even before that. 35 millimeter cameras have been around for 60, 70 years, producing readily available. Everybody took their little film to the supermarket and had it developed at the drugstore. So this is quite common. So these very common, and it even had a huge industry of it where they had little photo booths in parking lots and other places where you would drive up and drop your film off. And you would come and pick it up a day or two later or a week later. It depends on the service. Some had 1 hour developing. And these companies supposedly made millions at that time. So it wasn't like there wasn't a lot of 35 millimeter or other type cameras out there. Why would he recommend using a Polaroid? Well, because he understood that eloptic energy was kind of in the light wave area, was in this non-electromagnetic spectrum. So he recommended using that. Again, heard that somewhere else before, Bert? Well, you certainly have. So these are just further cementing how important it is to use those cameras, how important it is to use one of Radionic Tech's cameras, which brings you a very potent energy field, which amplifies what a normal Polaroid does. But so the fact is that he considered eloptic energy to be something that can be accessed using non-machinery, which I disagree with. I mean, you can, but it's the difference between, I can walk to the store. I can walk 1,000 miles. I can walk across the United States. Frankly, I'd like to use a plane, and that's what the God Box is, the radionic machine is. That's exactly what it is. So why would you do something slow, primitive, and fraught with danger and failure when you can do something quite easy? But the average person cannot connect to high psychic energy fields, high consciousness fields. They just can't do it. They're not developed enough. They're brainwashed. They're controlled. They have no idea what they're doing, no matter how nice their intentions are. So this is why having a machine is so important. And secondly, there's pretty much nothing that a human does that can't be amplified. Well, you could call driving in an automobile amplified walking. You're going from A to B, right? So if you want to amplify your walking, what do? Use a car, a bicycle, etc. Who wouldn't do that as a normal mode of transportation? So the whole idea is it just makes sense. Why would you want to walk everywhere, take that extra time, go through that physical effort? Why? What's the point of it when you're doing common chores? Obviously, physical fitness is important, and you should take the time to do that and do whatever is best, and that ain't necessarily walking. So we all need to understand that. So, and the problem is it's not amplified. So if you were to get in a car and you were to drive at the same speed of walking, it still would be pretty good because of the fact that you're getting there with less effort and you feel better. But it still would not be amplified. The fact that you can get in a car and go 40, 50, 80 miles an hour shows how amplified it is. So there's a great difference. The difference between getting there in a couple of minutes or getting someplace in 15, 20 hours, days, months. That's the difference with it. So using a machine is on. The fact that you can connect to eloptic energy, which you do with your higher consciousness, otherwise known as subtle energy informational fields, is, of course, anybody can connect to these, but you're connecting to them at low level. You can sustain them at low levels, etc. When you amplify and use a particular radionic machine, you are amplifying what you're doing. You're sustaining the energy for unlimited periods of time. These cannot be underestimated. So this stuff gets to be a little bit tiresome if it's not clarified. I'm sure that Heironymus would agree with that 100%. It was his student, a Campbell, who was the one who tested unplugged machines and machines that were just patterns. And this was published, I believe, in Analog. Is that the name of it? I'm not sure. The publication where he talked about how the pattern of a machine itself causes the energy to be transferred. Here again, it does, and it does work. But let's fully understand that non-electric machines have a low level of amplification. Now, we've tried to bring this up, particularly in our recent upgrades of our symbolic boxes, with the putting inside the boxes a very energetic plate with an actually tachyon neutrino graviton energy cell on that new active plate. So you're getting a very powerful machine that is non-electric. But ultimately, if you're not amplifying and transmitting, you're dealing with preschool technologies. And yes, they work slow. They have a much higher failure rate, a huge failure rate compared to the electric. And it's just the way it is. Everything in life that's amplified is better. Just like an automobile is better than a bicycle. When you use a symbolic bike, when you use a symbolic box, it's like riding a bike. When you use an electrified radionic tool, it's like using a car. So let's understand that if you have too high of expectations over non-electric stuff, you're going to be disappointed. That's why we always recommend it, but they are inexpensive, and hey, they are still good, and they still can assist you in doubling and tripling your average abilities right now. But nothing beats an electronic base box, particularly the ones offered by Radionic Tech. So Heironymus, who's given most of the credit out there because he has a patented device, but a lot of that was just something that him as an electronic engineer working for big corporations, he threw in things like the use of a prism for this energy and into the machines kind of as a ruse. It was a way to explain the operation of the machine to get a patent. It doesn't really do anything per the person who worked with him. It was just kind of a thing to get the patent and to make it a little special. But the actual tuning of it is classically radionic. But of course, he did use tunable capacitors, not potentiometers. So he much preferred that, and there may be a benefit to that, but tunable capacitors are something a little different now, harder to get and use, and old capacitors are very big. They can be 3-4 inches long, and that means you have to use a special type of machine, box, etc. It makes it difficult, and they are very expensive. But that was what Heironymus was big into, and using this technology. So it was very interesting. He claims to have proven his technology as usual. There were problems there. He claims to have proven it on healing people, which was put to a quick end. So the gossip is he moved over to agriculture, and here again claimed great success. Now, the problem is we just don't know. A lot of these things are problematic. The actual pesticide industry is a multi-hundred billion, maybe trillion-dollar industry all around the world. So if you eliminate pesticides, you're going after the big boys. So the whole idea is you're going to be shut down quickly. And there has been some talk of people who were using these machines that the FCC came after them saying, you're broadcasting without a license. This was one of the gossips. We just don't know. I wouldn't be surprised. You're talking big money here that run these companies that make pesticides when it could be done without toxicity to the earth or what you eat by using these kind of radionics. And it goes on and on with the proof of this technology. As far as we know, some people have repeated it, like Little Farm Research apparently claims to have repeated lots of agricultural stuff. I believe they're no longer in business. All of this stuff is companies that are out there, but there's very little substantiation. There doesn't seem to be a big movement of people trying to do this. So we just don't know. It's very hard to get information, and you are going against the big corporations who can step on you easily. And if you become too big, I mean, it's not too difficult to pay somebody to actually have you killed. They can have you arrested. They can find some way to set you up. I mean, this is how the world works. It's as simple as that. The people who have the money, who are in control of the markets, because there is no capitalism, there's no free trade, that's all nonsense. There's guys with the money that make sure they keep getting the money by eliminating you one way or another, whether it's governmental, whether it's directly. That's the way the game is played. So all of this is always the problem with anything alternative. You know, how well does anything work? Did the different anti-cancer treatments work? Did Wilhelm Reich really cure anybody? Is this all just government persecution, or is there some shred of evidence that this kind of alternative stuff doesn't really work that well? And but of course the problem is what does work well? Common doctory treatment? Well, doctories don't do much of anything except hasten your death. So again, we just don't know. We need to have free, open practicing of this. People need to do the research, report their results, etc. Now, when you look into things, there has been claims that these kind of things have helped people, and there's been studies saying that they have shown, done in clinical situations, that the success rate is kind of poor to a lot of alternative stuff. Again, do we know if any is truth to this? No, we don't. Everything is covered up. A lot of alternative practitioners themselves are delusional. They're in it for the money, or at least they get trapped in it. Now they need the money even more because they can't go back to traditional medicine. So they treat people with things that work, and they're persecuted for it. And they also get into the trap that if it doesn't work, they can never admit that it wasn't. Hewlett Clark, the famous Cure for All Cancer, 2 giant books, died of cancer at 73, I believe. 71, 73, whatever it was. So certainly she didn't have the cure for all cancers. So we just don't know what's going on. Does that negate her entire research? Well, not really. We have to find out whether there's a validity to it and a basis to it. We just don't know. We have to find out. But Heironymus, of course, is one of the touted radionic practitioners because of the fact of his so-called learning. But the whole idea is that he must have researched and was big into radionics, and this was his version of Abrams and Drown boxes, which he tweaked himself, finding out that you get better results using certain types of electronics. And that's really what it gets down to. The point is that he developed a machine that can analyze and treat and has been shown to be very effective from what we know. So, but the bottom line is that we really don't know. Did he did something strange or different? No, not really. What he threw in there was this prism. And this prism, which you could then adjust as the light hit it, claimed that this kind of energy was important to the entire process and was able to get him a patent because of that. This could be totally bogus because the machine itself doesn't have much of anything else in it than regular classical radionic wiring. So there's nothing overly different or unusual about a Heironymus machine other than the use of tunable capacitors and this mysterious prism. But basically, past that, it's a radionic machine. I even have one from the early 50s that he manufactured with tubes in it. So, which is quite interesting and will be opened up someday on my all-access membership on the website or on Patreon. So if you want to see things, you want to support this organization, you want to find out the latest developments, we have the largest radionic school on the planet now at All Access. Very little will be left here on YouTube. All of it's being transferred to Patreon and to All Access, where you have access to 3 schools, 3 libraries, huge amounts of additional pages of information on every possible subject you can think of, all manifesting success tech, practical information from healing to all advanced technologies, time travel, invisibility, you name it. We get into all of it, but we are very centered on radionic technology and manifesting in your life for you. This is a big, important area in your life that we specialize in, and we're the only organization really out there giving you vast amounts of information. We have training courses and all those. It's all there, and those that want to support us past that should also be members of Patreon. So go up to the upper right. You can find our website. You can join All Access, and of course you can help out in Patreon. That's the way the world works now. You vote with your wallet. You vote with your feet. You support those who are actually doing something and trying to do things instead of supporting the same old crew of corrupt scumbuckets that are out there taking your money and getting no results, like the Cancer Society, Red Cross. What have they ever done? Trillions of dollars, and we still have no cures for anything and really haven't gotten anywhere. The death rate from cancer is pretty much the same it's always been, and there's very little improvement there. There's very little improvement from any organizations who are basically kind of business frauds that go out there and raise money, and where 90% of it goes to administrative costs, meaning goes in salaries of the people running the group. What work they do? Well, not much for the dollar that you put in. So maybe 5-10 cents of a dollar you give to a company goes to it. In this organization, pretty much 90%, well, all of it goes to there. I mean, you have to pay out salaries, so people have to live. So that's part of life. So in the Red Cross, you get $1 million as running that as a salary. How nice. So the whole idea is that all those things that go with that are critically important to understand. So here again, to sum it all up, is Thomas Galen Heironymus understands that, number one, when you're using his machines, or these kind of energy machines, you must use Polaroid pictures. These are non-electromagnetic fields. Duh! That's right, I've been saying this for quite some time. We've now further affirmed it. It's a unusual and different non-electromagnetic energy. And plain and simple, you have to use a machine to get any kind of advanced results from it. That training yourself to try and do this on a psychic level is a fool's errand. You would have to go through years of proper training, focusing, meditation, understanding the process. Well, why do that when you can just tune a machine in? So very important to understand these facts that now are further agreed upon by the pioneers in this field, who I've been trying to keep up, and my research has confirmed it. I really wasn't aware that Heironymus stated to use Polaroids, or that this was really a non-electromagnetic field. I just noticed that recently after rereading some of his literature. So this is a fact. Again, old Doc Thor is 100% right. I always am. The solutions to everything come in the field from radionics, otherwise known as subtle energy physics. Get involved with it. Take courses. This is the ultimate solution. These are the God boxes which you can do most anything with once you're trained, once you understand how to use them, and this will take time, but it doesn't mean that you can't get results pretty quickly, as you can get with numerous of the technology offered by Radionic Tech. So make sure you get on the team. Make sure you're participating in life. You're going to need this technology to survive in the future, people. Rough times are here. It's getting rougher. We're going to be facing horrible illnesses. We have all sorts of mental problems, and the physical conditions are going to get worse. The planet is horribly toxic with radiation. You're going to have to take it into your own hands to save yourself and your family. It's all here. Get involved. Be part of the solution, not part of the problem.